Being asked to lead this online service has highlighted for me the impact that COVID-19 has had on our patterns of worship. Instead of being able to meet Sunday by Sunday, we've been locked out of our church buildings some weeks, and the rest of the time we've been having to decide whether to take the risk of infection that even attending a shortened service in masks may involve. And only those of us who have computers of some kind have been able to tune into online services like this one. Whatever long-term effects all this may have on the number of people sharing in services of worship week by week, it does give us a good reason for thinking about why we should do this. And the story in today's appointed gospel reading about Simeon's and Anna's encounter with Jesus when they were worshipping in their main church, the Jewish temple, is a good place to start. That's especially so if we link it to the other two times in Jesus' life when Luke's gospel tells us that he visited that temple, one when he was 12 and one when he was probably in his early 30s. I'm grateful to the Iona community for opening my eyes to that link through a song from them that focuses on it. We begin with Jesus' first time in the temple, the time that we've already heard and sung about. Although Jesus was only a little baby on that first visit, seeing him there opened the minds of two old people, Anna and Simeon, to new insights. In particular, insight into the good news he was to bring, of which Simeon said, "My eyes have seen your salvation, a light for revelation to the Gentiles and for glory to your people Israel." In our church too, we can meet Jesus and receive new insights from him through hymns, prayers, readings and sermons, and through each other as we share our hopes and fears, our doubts and convictions, and our love. And as I'm within 2 months of reaching 90, I'd like to think that, like Simeon and Anna, we're never too old to receive new insights. I remember a service in Woodstock when Michael Skinner was still ministering there. He said then that our faith that God had created the universe and all kinds of living things didn't mean having to believe that this only took 6 days of 24 hours. After that service, someone who was in her late 80s at the time and is no longer with us said, "I'd never realised that before. Aren't I silly?" Her ability to accept a new insight in her late 80s was actually the opposite of silly. She, like Anna and Simeon, reminded us to be open to what's new, to welcome new insights, however old we are, and however old those are who have new insights to share with us. So much for the experiences of those who met Jesus on his first visit to the temple. Jesus' second visit to the temple, which Luke's Gospel describes, is the one when he was 12 years old and went there with his parents to celebrate the Passover. And he stayed behind when his parents had set off home. When they went back to look for him, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And when Jesus' parents told him of the anxiety this had caused them, he said, "Did you not know that I was bound to be in my Father's house?" What does this story tell us about the experiences we may have when we go to church? Well, just as the teachers in the temple had questions put to them by the child Jesus, so we are likely to find ourselves faced by questions raised in our minds by the worship and the study of our faith in which we share in church, and questions from those whom we meet there. In particular, like the teachers in the temple, we may face questions from children and others with a childlike faith, and Jesus may speak to us in their questions. I know that my wife Anne, who is one of our junior church leaders at Woodstock, has found her own faith being challenged and so helped to develop by the questions that our young people have asked her. That's how it must have been for the teachers who met the child Jesus on his second visit to the temple. The third of Jesus' times of visiting the temple, which Luke's Gospel describes, began on the first Palm Sunday. Luke says that after Jesus had ridden into Jerusalem on a donkey, he went into the temple and began to drive out those who were selling things there. And he said, "It is written, my house shall be a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of robbers." The temple authorities were robbing the pilgrims who came there to pray by charging them highly inflated prices, both for the animals and birds that they were expected to sacrifice and for the currency that they needed to pay the temple tax that they were charged. The profits those authorities could make from the people who came to worship mattered more to them than the people themselves did. What can we churchgoers learn from Jesus' third visit to the temple? One thing which we in our capitalist society need to hear at least as much as the people did who were in the temple that day is that people matter more than profits. And more generally, that story of Jesus challenging those in the temple by witnessing to the importance of people reminds us that it's often when we're together physically or on the line for church worship that the teaching and example of Jesus will challenge us. So, to sum up, it's often when we're worshipping in church, physically or virtually, that Jesus comes to us, just as he came to those in the temple on the 3 occasions we've been remembering. He comes to challenge us and our priorities, not only by his own words and example, as he did on his third visit to the temple, but also by the words and example of the other people we meet at church, including both those who are young, as Jesus himself was on his second visit to the temple, and those who are old, as Anna and Simeon were at Jesus' first temple visit. May God help us to know when Jesus is challenging us through the written word, through other people, and in other words, in other ways, both in church and out of it. And when Jesus does challenge us, may we listen and respond, and so reflect more brightly in our own lives that light for revelation to the Gentiles and for glory for your people Israel, of which old Simeon spoke. Amen.